Michael, through the course of the years that you've been in the business, what mistakes have you made or seen made that you learned from, gleaned from, and have applied in your years current now and where you see going forward that will guide your plans forward?
Uh, I've made lots of mistakes. You know, I suppose it depends on what level we're talking about. For example, when I first started in the business, and when I got to Davidoff and moved to New York, I was 22. So I was significantly younger than everyone else I was working with, and I felt like the only way I'd be taken seriously is by trying to compete with my coworkers, compete with my customers on a social level. So it was always about trying to prove that I knew what I was talking about, because the first impression was probably that I didn't, because I was so young. And it backfired because it just made me look like a cocky kid, which was not my intention. And someone very near and dear to me just looked at me and was like, you really need to stop talking. And I was like, you are so right. And he said, you always, how did he say it? You always seem smarter and more impressive if you just don't say anything, because once you start talking, then you have the risk of saying something stupid or making a mistake. And I quickly learned that sometimes just being there and listening, in fact, always being there and listening instead of talking, it not only gives a better impression of yourself because you can't screw it up, but you learn so much by just watching and listening and taking it all in. So that was something I learned early on. It's also a mistake I continue to make, is sometimes talking too much and not listening enough. But I really try hard to take a step back and listen more. From a brand development standpoint, I've seen over the last 10 years a lot of brands that I didn't think would work explode, and brands that I thought had legs just vanish. And so you try to figure out what went wrong with those particular projects. Sometimes it was the people behind them that just created their own personal implosion, and therefore the brand went with it. But I think in any creative process, it's really important that you remain true to the roots of whatever the brand is. And if you're creating a brand out of thin air, you have to approach it as a brand out of thin air. If you're launching a cigar and it's your first effort and you're going to tell me it's limited, well, of course it's limited. It's your first shot. It's about as limited as it could possibly be. So, by trying to create artificial exclusivity or create artificial roots in an industry, I always get a kick out of pictures where you have a brand owner who is, in a field smelling tobacco, picking tobacco. Of course it's important, and all the brand owners understand tobacco and enjoy it and embrace it. But at the same time, maybe there's something more authentic about that person that's worth showing, But those aren't mistakes. They're just part of that. Becomes the authenticity of that brand story. So I don't think that there are a great deal of mistakes that are worth mentioning, because most people, particularly in our business, are surrounded by so many other people that are helping. I mean, that's so unique about our industry. Look at an organization like Pro Cigar. You have 7 manufacturers that all compete with each other, and yet those 7 manufacturers are helping each other. They're absolutely committed to helping each other. What other industry do you have where direct competitors are in an organization together where they help each other? It's just it's just so great. So if you are going to make a mistake, hopefully you're surrounded by enough people that are honest enough and care about you enough to point it out, that you learn together as an industry.
What giants in the business that are of the older generation would you point out really formed your way of knowledge, and that you attribute your success and knowledge that you've gained from them? Who would you point out that would be those men?
From a retail standpoint, as far as I'm concerned, the two great retailers in our industry were Zeno Davidoff and Nat Sherman, and very, very different types of businesses, but their roots were the same: service, experience. That it was more than just a transaction at the register. That the experience of purchasing was important. I've been taught by great people. David Kitchens, who ran the Davidoff store, went to Holtz, now runs a great store in Providence called Soma. George Brightman. George, the first cigar I smoked in New York City, I smoked with George on the first day that I moved. And George, who was he's been a retailer, he's worked for Cigar Aficionado, he's done brand development with other projects. George is a guy that will remind you how much you still need to learn about anything, because he just knows more about it than everybody. From a manufacturing side, first and foremost is Manuel Quesada. Manolo, I met with David Kitchens originally, and his daughters are about my age, and he's like my father in DR. I just have such profound affection for their family, and they really are family to me. So he's taught me a tremendous amount, as well as his family has taught me a lot, and we've also learned a lot together as young ones growing up in the business. But all the manufacturers just are so interesting and passionate. When you look at some of the, I hate to say old timers, but some of the older generations, the Benjis of the world, Jose Sejas, Guillermo Leon, his father Don Fernando was an amazing man. You learn about business in a time that was just different than how we do business today. And so to be around those guys and spend time with them and talk tobacco and smoke cigars is the best learning experience you can possibly have.
Come right here. That there, Cigar Federation, is deep cigar wisdom.